Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Wherever you find us, whether it's a video or podcast on your favorite platform, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. You can also find us on major social media platforms. If you go to MiamiGhostChronicles.com, you can find links to the videos or MP3 files, which you can download and enjoy without commercial interruptions. If you're into classic horror, ghost, and adventure stories, I narrate Nightshade Diary, and you can find links at nightshadediary.com. If scary stories are your bag, and listening to encounters with cryptids, ghosts, dogmen, and other weird creatures sends a shiver up your spine, then go to supernaturalstorytime.com for links to our weekly podcasts. Noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird can be found at eerie.news or visit the Stranger Than Fiction Stories tab at miamighostchronicles.com. Please subscribe to my newsletter on Substack. Just go to mppellicer.com for a link. I want to thank you for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi, everybody. How's everybody doing? Good? Getting used to filling out the date 2023? Yeah, I have to catch myself a few times. Yeah, that January, telling you, it's like 2023. Anyway, everything is good here. Having some cold weather, even in North Florida, but it's expected. What can I say? But being the weather wimp that I am, for me, it's a big deal. It's like, yep. And of course, I've had people ask me, what happened to the New Year's Day resolution video? And I started thinking about it. Besides the fact that I've been really busy, I said, you know what? I already did the New Year's resolution. I said, I'm going to do the after, when people are about to crash and burn, after you already made your New Year's resolution. And now all of a sudden you start the first hiccups, of the resolution before, as a matter of fact, before you crash and burn. So I'm going to do that. As in, I was thinking about it, and it's maybe a better way to address, things that from your perspective might seem coincidental. There's no way this is manipulated by me. It's just a coincidence or circumstances, and to explain exactly how your subconscious mind makes personal sabotage look like coincidence, with the timing, things like that, which of course it's over a period of time before you know it. The New Year's resolution, whatever it was that you made to do or not do certain things, all of a sudden fall by the wayside little by little. And, and of course, all of this is usually to ease the conscience of like, well, after I invested all that money in the gym membership, or, oh, well, after I bought that clothes or the this or the, whatever the case might be. No, it couldn't be helped. It couldn't be helped. It's not my fault. So yeah, I'm going to do a video on that, to move past that and to salvage your New Year's resolution. But anyway, let's get on to the good part. And the good part is who we have as a guest tonight. This is the first time that she's been here on Stories of the Supernatural. Her name is Shetan Noir, and she is a Michigan-based author and journalist. She's a cryptozoology researcher and has spent 25 years researching the paranormal and cryptozoology fields. Her fascination began with lake monsters at an early age when she first learned about the Loch Ness Monster, then hearing report of lake monsters in her own state of Michigan. Her research has since grown to include Michigan's own Dogman and Nain Rouge, Bigfoot, and ghost hunting. Shetan has written many books titled Mothman and Other Flying Creatures of the Midwest and Lake Monsters and Odd Creatures of the Great Lakes. She also writes articles for various magazines and websites. She is currently the lead investigator for the Michigan chapter of the North American Dogman Project and also runs the paranormal investigation team of Michigan's Center for Unexplained Events and Phenomena. Help me welcome her today. How are you doing today, Shetan?
Hi, I am doing great, and thank you for having me on the show this evening.
No, on the contrary, it's my pleasure. So what was it? What was the book or that inspired that fascination with lake monsters when you were a kid?
I believe it was actually seeing a TV episode on the Loch Ness Monster, and not to age myself, but back during the times of like the Bionic or the $1 Million Man and
Yes.
MacGyver and stuff like that. Every once in a
Uh-huh.
while, there would be this interesting show where they did, it would be, something to do with the paranormal or
Yes.
Bigfoot or something like that, usually around the Halloween season, you know,
Yes.
just to pique everybody's interest. And I was always very drawn to those shows. And then as I got a little bit older, um, back at that time, everything paranormal or cryptozoology, UFO was all under the umbrella label of New Age. So,
Yes,
you
you're
know,
right. You're right.
you'd go to the bookstore and there'd be one book with like a
Yeah,
different chapter on each subject, and it would come out like, maybe once a year. And you'd
exactly.
read it thoroughly and you'd like add that to your little collection. And then, Fate magazine came out, and it was like, oh, okay, that's the
Yes.
jackpot for any young teenager at that time wanting to learn more. So you'd patiently wait every month for your Fate magazine and you'd read it. And nowadays it's like, oh, you want to know anything? Just go on the internet, and
Oh, of course. Now it's
it's
like,
like
yeah, this and that.
there's
The internet was the
so much
death of the
source
printed.
material. Oh my gosh. But back, uh 35 years ago, it
Yes.
was like, you had your Edgar Casey books,
Mm-hmm.
and then a few, niche,
Yes.
books on maybe like the subject of Bigfoot and Loch Ness Monster or
Right.
UFOs or stuff like that. And so it was hard to find the information. But if you did your due diligence, and went to the library or the bookstore every
Well,
week
yeah,
to
you would
look
only
at,
see stories once in a while if a newspaper ran, like you
like,
said, a certain story or a magazine, like, but that was about it. So unless you caught at the right time, it's not
right,
like now. Mm-mm.
right. So yeah, that's what, started my interest. And then from there, it was just a, there's different pursuits of knowledge.
Right.
And so like my older brother would be all about technology, and now he's a computer science engineer and software designer. And my younger brother, he is all about cars and mechanics. And for me, my pursuit of knowledge was the paranormal and the natural world of how, species behave, how, um,
Okay.
they interact with us as human beings. For a long time, I trained dogs, and I worked with dogs.
Okay.
So that working knowledge of how canines behave and how other mammals, reptiles, amphibians behave gives me I think a good standing point for how a cryptid creature of that classification, whether it's
Okay.
dogman or Bigfoot or a reptilian or lake monster, how they would behave in the natural environment, especially if they were trying to avoid human detection. But
Sure.
what kind of behaviors would they display? What kind of, techniques would they use to camouflage themselves? And so that just became a learning base for me. And it's been a lifelong pursuit of balancing the common sense with what information is out there and how I know natural occurring species behave versus cryptid species.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Because they might be related. Let's say if you look at dogmen, for example, or wolves, dogs, it's
Yes.
a canine. If you go on that, um, and of course, dogs are domesticated, but still, I
Yeah,
guess,
but
there's a certain
dogs.
core kind of, I imagine, behavior.
Right. And so dogs will naturally form a pack.
Right.
And generally, even your domesticated dogs,
Yes.
their human family is part of their pack. And the
Yes.
dog actually should be the lowest man on the totem pole. But some people, kind of
Oh,
screw
yeah.
that up, and, their dog is the dominant one in the family. But canine behavior is canine behavior. So a pack mentality means that I, as an individual, do not have to work that hard to maintain a life.
Right. Survive.
Meaning, if you work together with a pack, there's safety in numbers. If a pack hunts, generally they are more successful at a kill of a bigger animal. And there's a ability to travel around and at least be comfortable.
Right.
Whether it's, finding shelter together or the protection aspect or just having the food aspect. But if you apply that mentality to the dogmen, because you know that there's going to be alphas, you know that there's going to be betas, and then there's going to be your submissive underlings behind that. But every member of the pack is important because your healthy, strong adults are the ones who are going to carry the pack, but they need the older members of the pack who know where the good hunting grounds are, or who can teach them a better hunting strategy than what they've, been using, or has experienced something in life where they can warn the others, hey, this is a human area and these humans have weapons. Let's avoid this area.
Right.
But you also have, all of them teaching the younger ones how to behave and what, the hierarchy of the pack is, and what are good technologies and techniques to use when you're hunting or when you're communicating or when you're trying to behave like a wolf and not look like a dog man. So these are
Right.
all
Exactly.
important things that a whole pack will teach. Now, I think with Bigfoots, you have adult females that live in a family group raising their young, and I think you have solitary males who kind of wander the territories and breed with all the different females. And I think that the males kind of stay out of each other's territory until one moves off into another territory, and then they go back into that territory, breed with the females, and this gives a more diversified genetic
Right. Yeah, because people
population.
don't realize that you need to diversify your bloodlines so that.
And we do see this in other primates of the females eventually will chase off a male so that they can get another male in
Hmm.
to have, better livestock. Human beings are actually the only primates that are monogamous or try to be monogamous in their relationships.
You know what? And this is something I read a while back, and if I will give it credit, and again, when you read something once, and I can't tell you
Mm-hmm.
how accurate it is or what the source is, but this is what it said. And this was back, like, I think they did this, I want to say either 1950s, 1960s. It wasn't recent. In other words, so usually when, like you said, monogamy was more, you know, and they did a study of a mom or couple that had 4 children. Okay. And they found 3 of the children belonged to the husband or father,
Uh-huh.
but they had a high percentage of a 4th child that was fathered by someone else.
Yep.
Unbeknownst, of
Yep.
course, this is not like the father
Yep.
knew.
But then you have to wonder how many other children that father
and what
sired with
was
other
really
women.
strange was it wasn't like the mother. She had like a one or twice encounter. In other words, like
Right.
almost she had this child fathered by I'm not sure. I'm sure she didn't extrapolate it that way, but it wasn't like she left and was with this other
Right.
man and came back with no. She like went and maybe had a fling. How's like the mailman? You know how you hear that
Yep.
prototypical milkman, whatever. And but nobody was the wiser. And of course you have to remember back then, it's not like now DNA that you could do a paternity test.
Yep.
But they found they were amazed at the high percentage of that there was this one child that had been fathered knowingly by, but as far as the mom was concerned, by a different father. And it makes you think, okay, how much of this is what you were describing where, there's a diversity in the, is it nature versus whatever
Right.
versus, society, what society tells us is acceptable, like you said, monogamy or,
Right.
and this is the thing from what I understand is that also this thing that males are more prone to protect the young, they're young. You understand? Their offspring.
Yeah, it is because so like with big cats,
Right.
well, and even house cats, what you will see is if you have a community of cats, the male who has sired that season's kittens will stay around to make sure his kittens grow
Grow.
to adulthood, because if he gets killed or chased off by another tom, that tomcat will wait until, or male lion will wait until the female's distracted and then just go kill the cubs
Cubs,
or the
yes, right.
kitten.
They want their bloodline. They want their
and
genetics.
and they will kill them, just, but we see that with a lot of different animal species.
Yes.
Hippos are very aggressive with that. Horses can be aggressive with that, and
Yes.
for whatever reason they can tell their, what's their offspring and what isn't their offspring.
Right.
And so it's, the poor moms, you have to be, that much
Right, right. But
diligent, more diligent,
people
or they
people
have
think that
to,
it's and I think that us as being animals at the end of the day, you know,
yeah,
yeah, sometimes that's why I'm saying that this female or this mom, this wife or whatever, kept it on the down low. She never
yep,
said,
yep,
this fourth child, which could have been a second or third, it's just one of the four, is not biologically
right,
yours, for whatever reason. But yes, I know what you mean as far as the diversity. It's like an inner knowing, who knows, or it could have been a variety of reasons. Let me ask you because I know that it's really funny because before you would, like you said, before there was only Bigfoot. And,
yeah.
since the Patterson film and the thing in the 70s, and I want to say Dogman, unless you tell me differently, is something more recent as far as the sightings.
Well, it's so the Patterson and Giblin film, I believe that was filmed in the
Was it the
60s.
60s? I
And
always think
then Linda Godfrey started getting these reports
in
back
the
in,
90s, right?
yes, and I think, or it could have been the 80s. Um, and she started getting these reports of what people were essentially calling a werewolf. And so
Right.
when she went into, and I have to say, Linda Godfrey has since passed. We lost her
Yeah, I know she
back,
passed away.
back in November, which is a huge loss for not only the Dogman researchers community, but cryptozoology as a whole. She was instrumental in opening up so many doorways for female investigators, and also bringing to light that, these reports of the Dogman were, not just located in Elkhorn, Wisconsin. She was
Right.
getting reports from all over the world. But essentially, when she started getting these reports, she was, I believe, the illustrator for the magazine. And they said, hey, can somebody go cover this story? So
I
she went out and covered it. So she goes to animal control and she's like, so what's your take on this,
She's just thinking it was
werewolf?
just gonna be a one-time story.
And,
This
and
is
they hand her this 2-inch thick file, and they're like, here you go. And it's labeled werewolf. And she's like, oh. And literally that took her into writing the books about it, becoming one of the, well-known researchers for it. And so it's now that when people do have an encounter, because everybody who saw anything upright, bipedal and large and hairy and scary running across the road, immediately thought it was Bigfoot,
right, exactly. You're right.
because they didn't realize that there was other bipedal creatures out there that could run across the road. So now when we're interviewing people, we ask, okay, give us a description of the creature. And, we're waiting to hear those key elements. Well, it had pricked ears, or it had ears standing on top of its head. Well, primates have very flat ears, like apes, or like humans, where it's very close to the head, so you don't see ears on a Bigfoot.
Exactly.
Also, they have a very human flat face, whereas a dogman has a long snout. Also, Bigfoots do not have tails, and their legs look very human-like, more NBA, basketball
Right.
player like, tall and
Right.
thick. Whereas the Dogman has a little bit more angulation to their legs, which does give them a speed advantage. But it should be noted that Bigfoot and Dogmen can also go down on all fours and travel just as easily on all fours as they can on 2 legs as a bipedal.
Yeah, I've heard of that because everybody thinks that they just walk bipedally, but I've heard that they can move fast on all fours.
Yes, and it just depends on, I think, what kind of, ground they are covering, what kind of, surface they're, covering, and what they are doing. Are they picking fruit off the ground? And they've just been down on their hands and knees, and hey, that's easier to move around. Are they, cupping water to their mouth,
Hmm.
and you startle them and they take off, from a quadruped position? Or are they doing something even sneakier? And this is a behavior that I attribute with the dog man, is some of our reports are that people have stopped to help what they think is an injured large dog.
Oh boy.
And they get out of their cars and they're trying to coax the dog to them, but the dog starts to limp off into a cornfield or into a woods, and the people follow them.
This is
Okay,
like, let me tell you something, it's like
so
the ending of a horror movie. It's like, what are
so
you doing?
the key,
That part of following
if
them.
you don't want to be a prey item, if going
Yeah.
into a trap, if something looks off with the dog, or they
Yes.
larger than a malamute,
Yes.
do not follow them. This is what I believe is starting to become a hunting strategy for them, is
I wouldn't be surprised. Wouldn't that be? Yeah, it's
they
like,
they know when people drive up and down roads, because you rarely see a dog man crossing the road. You'll see a Bigfoot
right.
because they just don't care. But the dog men, I do believe, they use human beings and automobiles in two different ways. One, they try to lure you into the woods as a hurt animal,
Hmm.
limping along, and of course human beings want to help that animal. uh, you know
Scott,
let's see, if
let me
we
tell
can
you
get
something.
it.
I've seen enough dog rescue people to know that there's a lot of them that will be like,
and
"Oh my God, it's a hurt
and
animal."
we get reports every year of cars found alongside the road and the people are missing, and they never find the people.
Really?
There there are
Oh my
lots of
God. See?
411 reports about this, especially in more rural areas or near
Yes.
large state parks or national forests. But we also, and this is another interesting one, is, have you ever stopped and thought why so many deer run out in front of traffic when
Yes.
it's peak hours of traffic in the morning and in the afternoon?
Yes. That
And
that
they
that.
just kamikaze themselves across the road. They get hit, they get killed, or they get injured significantly and limp into the woods. And once the ambulance and the tow truck driver come and clean everything up and haul everything away, well, Dogman knows where it can find its meal.
It's me. It's
It's
like it's
either on the
almost like
side of the road,
when
or
you
it's,
chase something over the side of a cliff, while they chase it onto the road.
yep,
That's
so
so interesting.
so I do believe that that is a new hunting strategy that they have developed within the last 20 years. Is they monitor the activity on the road of when cars are coming and going,
Hmm.
and then they wait till the deer are in the area, and then they do a jump scare on one of the deer, make it bolt across the road, get hit by a car. Then they mark where the deer actually dies or falls away, and they just go pick up their meal, and to them that's fast food.
Let me tell you something. This sounds like Jurassic Park. The Velociraptor that they say she figures it out. That like like they learn. This is like the same thing. Like some point, hey, wait a minute. I've picked up a couple of because I have heard of people that have had sightings where they have found them eating roadkill.
Yes.
That they see something on the side of the road, and then when they get closer, they realize what it is, and it's eating the roadkill. And maybe at some point they, like you said, they caught on. Like, well, wait a minute.
Right. Car versus wild animal means something's getting a free
Free
lunch
food.
that
Free
day,
food.
or
Yes.
dinner.
Right.
Um,
And I tell everybody, whether it's a dog man or, a Bigfoot, you would think that as big as people report them, you need to eat a lot to survive. In other words, they got to consume X amount of food. All right. Especially proteins, I imagine. So, in other words, they're always thinking about
yes.
how to eat.
And
I got
and
to
one of the
eat.
things that one of the people always ask me, well, is it possible for a Bigfoot or a dogman to be in my area? And my answer to that is, do you have any farms nearby? Because cornfields or grain fields or any type of fruit or vegetable farms or orchards means deer, means rabbits, means turkeys.
Right.
Wherever you have those two components, a farm or an orchard that's producing a food source for deer or rabbits or turkeys, means that the circle
Right,
of
right. They
life,
know that this is I'm gonna follow my
my
food source
yes.
wherever it
So
goes to.
the deer, the turkey, the rabbits, they are always eating in the cornfields or the
Mhm.
orchard. And so the Bigfoot dogmen, they follow them, and they just, all they have to do is wait on the outskirts of the cornfields or the orchards. They don't really have to penetrate into it, because eventually something's going to spook those deer or turkey or rabbits, and they're going to run for what they
Yes.
think is the safety at the edge of the field. And just beyond that edge of the field is where the dogman or Bigfoots are going to be waiting to catch their prey. And now they have
Exactly.
a well-fed, basically, for the Bigfoot and the dogman, deer, rabbit, and turkeys are livestock, and are a plentiful meal that nobody's going to really notice if one or two go missing,
Right. Well,
every week.
especially that type of let me ask you, in Michigan, the winters, do you see a difference as far as any reports of sightings, like they might be migrating with their food source, or does it stay constant?
I think they do migrate, and I say that because here, like, well, this season, winter
Mhm.
season, is really weird because our grass is still green here.
Really?
We've gotten a couple blasts of snow and gotten
Mhm.
a couple of inches, but it melts within a day or so. And it's
Okay.
to the point where spring plants that should be coming up in like April, May are like, hey, we're ready to bud. And we're like, no, 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 stay in the ground, stay in the ground, stay in the
Right,
ground.
you're gonna get
I've got tulips and daisies that are lilies that are just like, hey,
yeah,
we
it's
want to bloom.
springtime.
It's like, no, you're gonna die. Um,
Right,
you know, my
so in
lilac,
other words
my lilac tree started reblooming in November, and I'm like, this is not going to be good. So it's been a very weird, mild winter where the grass is still exposed. So
right, which is
when we got 40 to 50, degree days, the bugs do come back out of hibernation,
yes.
and they're flying around. So the turkeys are eating them, the birds are eating them. The deer have plentiful food stock with the grass and the
Okay.
snow melts. They've got plenty of food and water. And so really they're not having that harsh of a winter. So it's
Right.
it's it's uh believable that they haven't migrated this year because they haven't really seen the need to do
Right, of
it.
course. They're driven by pursuit of food like all living things,
Right.
they go
But
where they can eat.
when it's a harsher winter, I do
Uh-huh.
think that they migrate to southern Indiana, southern Ohio, where your temperatures aren't that extreme. And
Okay.
unless it's a big blizzard that's going to cover the Midwest, they generally have access to, um, food, water, shelters. But we do get quite a few reports from farmers with old hay barns that they keep on finding animal carcasses inside the hay barns.
Oh
And they're
boy,
like,
can you imagine?
and we know that it's not a bear, a cougar, or a wolf or coyotes dragging it in there
Right.
because we don't have that activity. But where we keep on getting these carcasses, and we know that the animals aren't going in there and dying. Something's bringing
Sure.
them in and
Eating
stockpiling
them.
them. So something's living in these old hay barns or old straw barns and is kind of using that as a living area. And in the spring, when the snow's gone and berries are becoming available, flowers and grasses are growing, and that's bringing back in the deer and the rabbits and so forth. Then that's an opportunity for them to go back to eating fast food instead of just, uh, freezer food,
Well, you know what? I've always thought also that sometimes these reports that you see where they're coming close to more populated areas, I'm thinking, well, you know what? This could be maybe an older, or an injured one that maybe can't hunt where it normally would, the way it would. So
Yeah,
it kind of stays around where it could just eat easier, whether it's taking even a farm animal because it needs to eat.
right.
And yeah, normally for some reason, or maybe that, like you said, the winter is really harsh and normally, even Bigfoot and dogmen get old, as in,
Oh, yeah, yeah. But I'm certain that they know where to get food from. So, even if it's trash dumps,
exactly, exactly.
anywhere that the wildlife goes to eat, Bigfoot and Dogman will go too, because one, free food,
Sure.
and whether it's trash that humans have thrown out or it's the wildlife eating that trash, still a meal is a meal. Doesn't matter how you catch it.
They don't care, especially do you
And
think that some of these when you mentioned that, which I think is fascinating, that you said about these disappearances, I'm sure you've heard of the one in the national parks
yep, the
and,
411s, yes.
people that inexplicably even experienced, whether they're hunters or hikers or people that supposedly are familiar with the outdoors, all of a sudden inexplicably just disappear.
Yep.
Do you think that they might be falling victim to either dogmen or because I know there's a lot of people out there that are, especially when it comes to Bigfoot, are very hesitant to consider that they might see humans as prey.
Well, and that is, one of the elements of it is human beings, we think of ourselves as the apex predators on this
Sure.
planet. And it's very disturbing to us when we stop and consider there are other beings on this planet that look at humans like,
Yeah,
hello,
exactly.
who do you think you are? You
Yeah.
know, especially when we are in our elements when we're in our cars, when we are in our houses, or when we are in city, environments.
Mm-hmm.
But you go out into the woods, you go out onto a Great Lake or into the ocean or onto a mountain or, any of those situations where you are out of your element.
Exactly. Get the mercy of everything
And
because basically, I think that even physically, it's a tough environment to survive in.
right,
Yeah, like
right. So, we might be the apex predators in our self-imposed reality of,
yeah,
our cars, our houses, our daily jobs, running in and out of stores. But you go 5 miles out into the wilderness where the wild things are, and
yes,
suddenly the mountain lion doesn't care who you are.
abs,
If you're hiking by yourself, you are food.
yes,
Grizzly bear doesn't care. Polar bear doesn't care. Great white shark doesn't care. Orca doesn't care.
nope. No, they see you as
No, crocodile alligators do not care. If
no.
they see you and you are by yourself and they think that you are vulnerable and they are hungry, they will make a bid for you. And chances are you are not going to come back 100%,
You know what? When you
after
said
that.
the great white, that I understand the reasoning. You know how they say, "Oh, these great whites they mistake humans for seals," and I know that sometimes they say that so nobody goes off on a shark hunting expedition.
Right.
I personally think that they're not mistaking. They just see us as food. It's like it's a food human. They're not
Well,
mistaking you for a seal. I think they want it. Just they're gonna eat you.
so, because to me, one of the stupidities of humans is why on earth would you go out into the ocean in a black wetsuit
Yes.
with fins on? Because guess what? Now you look like a seal.
But you know what?
Except
They have
you,
found so many things, so many unusual, weird things in the stomachs of sharks that you
yeah.
realize they eat everything,
Oh
even
yeah.
stuff that's inanimate.
Oh yeah.
They'll
And so and it's like, why would you wear a black wetsuit?
It's like because I
Why?
have to.
I think that should be illegal to wear black wetsuits.
Yes,
Wetsuits should be color morphed or color designed to look like fish that are poisonous or venomous, or
right. That's a good idea.
so that sharks are like, hey, nope, nope, that will kill you. We will leave that one alone. But
Well,
that black thing swimming over there, we're going to go for that. Um, and it's
yes.
not just the great whites; it's bull sharks, it's tiger
Oh no,
sharks.
it's bull sharks. Yes, yes. There's a bunch
There's
of the
so many
tiger
different,
sharks.
you
Are
know, there's
there's
so
a
many different man-eating sharks
man
out there
eaters?
that
Yes,
it's
yes.
you can't just blame it on the great whites or the bull
Oh no,
sharks.
no, no, no. They do it because let's face it, after Jaws, it's all downhill from there.
Yeah,
But yeah, no, and there's a lot of them in warmer waters where people frequent the beaches more
right.
often. That as a matter of fact, they're more aggressive. They've been known more to attack human beings than the great white.
hmm
So
And
it's
what a lot of people don't realize is bull sharks are one of the few species on Earth that can live in fresh water for as
yes,
long as they want to. Which
yes.
so a cousin of mine just came back from uh, his platoon was stationed in Australia for a couple of months. And they literally told them, so, the safest place for you guys is on base where you are surrounded by, concrete enclosures that can be swept out and shot back every day. And you don't have to worry about anything poisoned. But check your boots, check your gear, check everything before you put it on
Wow.
because you never know what might crawl into your, uniform or your boots and bite you. Um, if you go, more than 50 miles away from like the towns, if you get bit or stung anything, chances are you are going to die before you get medical
Right, because
treatment.
out there it's yeah, they've got population out there that's
Oh yeah, they've got the top 10 deadliest everything's out there. And so, it's just, and he was like, yeah, he's like, we were all excited to go there. And then then they're telling us, well, you have to be aware of this kind of spider and that kind of spider and, this snake and this scorpion. Don't pick up the cane toads because you'll get this stuff on your hands that's poisonous. Oh, if you go swimming, be aware that we have like these 10 sharks that can kill you. Oh, and don't pick up any shellfish because if there's a blue ring octopus in the tide pool, it'll uh bite or sting you and you'll die from that. They're like, oh, and don't mess with the kangaroos, they'll punch you in the face.
yeah, I know. People don't
They're like,
realize those kangaroos can get aggressive.
they're like, you can't outrun the emus, and I'm like, so literally everything will kill you there. Even the platypus has a poisonous claw on it that they can jab you with and uh, you know hurt you with, and it's like, why does anybody go there? I don't see why anybody's like,
Yeah,
I'm going on vacation to Australia. It's like, what?
really?
Are you punishing yourself? Like,
Right, but don't like just go to the popular like Sydney or something. Don't go out into the bush because I've heard that's the last I'll see of you sometimes. As a matter of fact, I
yeah,
think that Australia is mostly populated on the coastals, on the coast,
yes,
but
yep,
on the interior, it's few and far between that you get people out
yep.
there because it's so harsh. Yeah, that's incredible. And he was like, okay, now that now that my excitement is like dissipated because my life is basically in the balance every day.
He's like, well, we don't really worry about, any like human, like, terrorist activities or anything like that, because the natural, species there are like,
Something will get you in
terrorists.
the meantime.
Yeah.
No, that's people don't realize that there's places. I guess when you grow up there, it's different because this is where you grew up. But for somebody coming from an area where that's not the norm, it's like, okay, like let me get it. Like that's paranoia all the time, whatever.
Yeah.
So let
Yeah.
me
It's
ask
like,
you, as far as since are you still doing the work with the with a North American Dogman Project as far as what people contacting you for reports?
Yes, I'm still the lead investigator for the state of Michigan.
Okay,
But if anybody in Michigan has a sighting or an experience, they can contact me. I will warn you ahead of time that I do have you fill out a full questionnaire,
some people don't want to do that, huh?
because I have gotten a lot of hoax reports over the years,
Okay,
and this is my one way, of many that I weed out potential hoaxers is if you don't have the time and the due diligence to fill out a
sure.
questionnaire and have it make sense, then
Absolutely.
I'm going to call it a hoax and stamp it as that.
Sure, of course. Let me ask, do you see, because I've spoken to different people who have said that they've noticed a trend where there's an uptick in cryptid sightings and in UFO sightings. Have you found that?
Yes, because what happened was when 2020 hit and COVID hit and we had all of the close downs, humanity and humans basically went indoors.
Yeah.
And the wild world was like, oh, hey, where'd all the humans go? And for 2 years, they kind of, ventured out into the rest of the world,
Okay.
kind of waiting and looking to see where are the humans. And then humans came back. We're back outdoors. We're back, traveling. We're back, running around the countryside. And so now it's a readjustment for them of okay, we had this time period where we were essentially, in control of everything.
Right.
And
Exactly.
we could access, anything that we wanted to because humans weren't around for us to be suspicious or wary of. But now humans are coming back. So now they are still, I think, testing to see what areas they can go into without seeing any human activity, or when are the humans there and when aren't the humans there.
Sure.
Because it
And
used to be that people would only see things when they were out hiking or driving backcountry roads or, lonely highways, and you would occasionally see something. And then in 2020 to 2000, 22, everything,
yeah,
started to
everybody
become,
it switched out. It's yeah,
yeah,
everybody's activity, like you said, everybody was working from home.
yes.
Exactly. So it was like that. Even
And
that traffic.
you only went out if you really needed to get groceries or
Right.
essentials. And so, literally the humans disappeared and the animals came back out like, hey, is it safe to be an animal now? And we don't have to worry about that human predator. And it wasn't, until, this past year that people really started to get back out and started doing things again. And now the animals are kind of like in a flux where it's like, okay,
Are they
um,
back again, or are they
what
going to leave? Or
is it safe for us to be here or are we better going back to where we were? So it's a learning experience for them too.
no, I think that these animals, sometimes we're unaware of it because like you said, we live in our own little capsule of whatever, my to-do list. I got to do this.
Right,
But in some, especially like I imagine, like what you're saying, whether it's urban, but more in the rural area, everything around us is always looking or reacting to what we do or don't do
right,
in some way, shape, or form. Whether like the farming or I mean, I've got chickens out here and the predators, they look at, when I say predators, I mean like coyotes and stuff like
right,
that. Everything bases like how easy are you going to make it for me to, get something
right.
from you, but everything reacts to us in one way or the other. Um, do you think, well, that's the thing. I think a lot of people, I'm wondering if now that they're going, because I've heard of people saying that they've seen like dogmen like around their houses, and then like you said, you see other reports of people seeing them only if they're going out like on
Right.
hiking or like on a very desolate rural road, and then they'll see it. Um, have you had stories like that of people seeing either a Bigfoot or the dogman at their home or on their farm or somewhere like that?
Well, usually when we do get reports that, people have experienced activity around their home, one of
Mm-hmm.
the first things that, we ask is, do you live on a farm or do you live near farms?
Okay.
Whether it is a you know uh corn or grain or fruit or vegetable farm, or do you have livestock? Because
Okay.
all of these things will draw in predators,
Yes. Yes.
and it will also draw in prey because it's not just the cows, the sheep, the goats, the horses out there that eat the hay and the grain that's put on the ground. The deer are going to come eat it. The turkeys are going to come eat it. The rabbits will definitely eat it because that's a fast, easy meal. You just have to wait till the herd moves away, and then at night go in and salvage whatever you can. But as those things are coming in to eat, the predators are following them in to eat them.
Have you had, because I've heard of people that have either been hunting or hiking, and they've had either a sighting of a dog man in this case, and then they start saying that they start seeing it around where they live. Have you ever had that? In other words,
No,
it's like,
because I've had a sighting of a Bigfoot and a dog man, but those were up in. So I live in Lower Michigan, and
mm-hmm,
my Bigfoot sighting was up in Ely, or no, Virginia, Minnesota, and my
okay,
dog man sighting was in the UP. And I've never seen any activity around my house, but I do live close. I live within a half mile, quarter mile of the town, so I wouldn't think that I would be seeing them
right,
where I live, but not too far from where I live, in Pinckney, Michigan. There's a state park, and people have called the police numerous times because they hear a scream or a howl going on in the woods, and it's not a coyote, it's not a wolf, and it's not a
right.
human being. So the police have been out there. The BFRO have reports for the Pinckney rec area, and that is a Bigfoot, dogman, hotspot. They don't know which one it is, but there are reports of those two cryptids in that area, and that's about, I want to say, 25 miles from where I live.
I mean, I've heard recordings of Bigfoot, out in the, well,
Yeah,
supposedly Bigfoot, and I'd be like, if I was camping and I heard this, it'd be like, it doesn't sound, it sounds like if you were in a jungle. It sounds primate like
the
without,
the
eh,
Ohio call. I'm
right,
assuming that
without being
real
primed.
long one.
It's like I would be like, that's not a known animal. And I've heard, cougars and a lot of these animals
Mhm.
sometimes will make very unusual calls, even mating, that people wig out, but it's like, no, no, no. The vocalizations, it doesn't sound like a cat or coyote or anything like that. It's like I'd be like, okay, I'm packing my stuff up and I'm leaving. That's how because uh when if I heard something like that, I'd be like, I'm going to be on the short end of the stick on this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it is because I go hiking throughout the year, and I usually have my three small dogs with me when I
Okay.
go hiking because they love to go hiking, and I do stick to um, well-used trails that are popular, so that I know that I'm at least going to pass or talk to another human being within
Right.
10 minutes or so at a time. But it's easy to see where people get um, you know, uh, lost in the woods. That was actually
Oh, don't worry. I have 7 dogs, so
okay.
you hear weird
That
sounds
was
every once in a while. It just so
the
happens that
babies.
everybody here is passed out here, close. But my audience knows that every once in a
Okay,
while you hear some weird noise, and that's okay.
so um, but it's easy to see where people on some of these trails now. Um, for me, if I'm going to go hiking, I want to make sure that there's something on the trail worth going to look at, like a waterfall or a cool rock
Right.
formation or something like that. A cool, growth forest. Um, but some of these more rural, less traveled, hiking trails, it's easy to see where if people, walk 10 feet off the path to
That's it. You're done.
use the restroom or something like that, and they trip and they hurt themselves, or they fall into a ravine or something like that, then you're looking at suddenly a worst case scenario. And even if they are, able to navigate back to the trail, sometimes they become so oriented of which way they were going, which way they were,
Yeah.
coming from. They don't know which way they were,
Yeah. Am I going towards or away from where I was coming through?
and they navigate back, and well, this doesn't look familiar, so they take a different path, and then they take a different path. And
Yes.
so it's very important, when you are hiking, to know the trails that you're going to take, to map it out. And even most of these trails are available on your cell phone, so you can
Right.
see, yep, I'm on the right trail, and this is where I turn,
And I'm
and this
thinking,
is
but
where I
maybe
come
there's
back
what
to.
if you don't have coverage where you're at? It's like
Right.
one of the,
And
and I've
that's
seen,
a huge
I'd be
issue.
like, oh man. And I've heard, I've read of people that go on these solo hiking trips, some multi-day hiking trips, and it's like, I'm no coward, but I'd be like, you know what? After if I read 411 and you hear these other stories, I'd be like, yeah, no, that self-preservation thing is gonna kick in for me.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
It's
yeah. Because of the 411 reports, and there's a podcast on YouTube I've just started watching. Is what lurks beneath, and what lurks beyond, and what lurks above.
yeah,
And it
it's
talks
like,
about all this crap that happens in the state parks and national forests that they don't
yes.
want you to know about. And I'm like, okay, now I have a new,
Do I really
safety
want it's like,
protocol. And it's like, when I get out of my car, I make sure I have, like, a good working pocket knife,
sure.
some a small thing of
Compass.
bear spray, um, an air horn. I have my 3 dogs with me, which they will pick up on anything before I do.
Yeah,
And then, there's things that I leave in my car, like a Ziploc bag with a pair of used socks in it, a
right.
map that, shows where I have been,
Right.
where I plan to go.
Yeah.
A, description of what kind of shoes I'm wearing, or a, impression of the tread of my shoe.
Right.
And
Yes.
leave that, because that all gives, first responders, emergency workers, that gives them what they need to start the
Something to work
process.
with, exactly. Yeah, when
A
time is of the
description of
essence.
what clothing I'm wearing that day. For me,
Yes.
that's very easy, because it's always something greenish blue or bluish green. My hair is, greenish blue or blue. You know, so these are all things that,
Right, that you're like
when
that.
they are looking for, that missing person, it's fast and easy to rule out who isn't the missing person.
Exactly.
And these are all things that you can, do to help, writing down
Sure.
your cell phone number.
Yes. And that, some surprisingly, a lot of people don't do that, or they don't tell anybody, hey, I'm going to go out on that trail or whatever. And when this person doesn't turn up a few days later, everybody's like, did you hear? Did you talk? Did you know what they were going to do?
Right,
No, we don't. No, nobody knows anything.
right.
And, hopefully somebody will report, hey, that car's been parked there at that
Right.
trailhead for a few days.
Yeah.
And then it's like, man, you're like a few days behind the, that's why if somebody needs help, like you said, if they got hurt or anything
Hmm.
like that, yeah, it's people sometimes I know don't think about that, but it's better prepared than
Yeah, and I think if you're going to go out into the elements, whether it's hiking or
yes,
kayaking or scuba diving or whatever, I think it should become a practice that, if for both the people who do it and search and rescue people, is make sure you have all this information inside your glove box.
yes,
So that is, or underneath your front seat. So if you do go missing, they know to check there first to see if you left evidence
mm-hmm,
of who you are, what you were wearing, your shoe pattern, what trails, or where you were, going. your length of time that you were expecting to spend out there and when you're coming back, so that they know. They know
Yes.
whether, okay, this is an emergency, or okay, the person's only been gone an hour. Let's give it a
Right.
little bit. So,
No,
these are
and
all
and
things that you can do.
I'm gonna throw into the mix. I don't know if you've heard of it. Putting the poor dog man and Bigfoot. Sometimes you have very unusual characters out there in some of these parks. Okay. People don't realize that you could run into, whether it's depends if they're doing something illegal, as in, meth labs or growing pot. That's the
Yep.
bigger, or just plain, just all you need is one person that's been living off the grid, and they're a little bit,
Yep.
they're they're not too straight in their head, and they can be dangerous. Not all of them, but some of them can be. If they run across you, like they just you could find yourself in a bad situation out
Right.
there.
And that's why it's important for, obviously everybody wants to do this for either exercise or recreation, but
Yeah.
it's important that you do have it in your mind that not every human being that you come across is going to
Yes.
be sane or
Yes.
a normal human being,
Yes.
because there's just as many serial killers that go out on the trails looking for people as there
Yes.
is that people who are just going out bird watching.
Sure.
So it's important for you to have within easy access a form of self-defense, whether
Sure.
that's bear spray or a knife or an air horn or a hiking stick that you can, defend yourself with, or a dog. Even a 40-pound dog can deliver a sizable bite.
Sure.
And you can train them to do a bluff growl or a
Okay.
pig growl and snarl, and give them, just a command. If the person
Right.
starts becoming too interested in you,
Mm-hmm.
tell your dog react, and have the dog start snarling and barking at the person, because that other person does not know whether your dog is going to actually bite them or if your dog is, just pulling back. My 7-pound min pin, she does her due diligence. She thinks she's 150 pounds and she will go for you. But her two babies are very docile and are like, we don't know why mommy wants to bite everyone. It's like, because mommy's trying to protect all of us.
Yeah, I know it.
So, but then, I've got the 7-pound min pin who will kill everybody. And then I've got
Yes.
a 130-pound mastiff who's like, I'm just going to go back to bed. It's like,
It's like, yeah. But people will probably see him, and anybody with ill intentions, like, nah,
right.
I'll pass on this. I don't want
Yeah,
to find out.
because she's very sizable and people are like, yeah, we're going to walk on the other side of the path. And it's like,
Yeah.
good girl. So just, that impression of, you know, don't, don't come close to me. I'm
Yes.
here for my own recreation. I'm walking my
Yes.
dog. I'm here, to enjoy myself. Keep your distance. But, people, they want to be polite. They want to be, they don't want to be termed a jerk or a bitch or anything like that. So
Right.
they indulge the person in conversation,
Yes.
and you don't realize that's actually like opening the gate.
Right now, you got to give that thing is like, yeah, I'm not I'm not here to have a conversation with you, because that's what
Right.
they're looking for. And I've even heard, and this happened down in South Florida back in the 70s, where they had the guy. What he would do is he would deflate the tire in the parking lot of this big shopping center. This was back when, the malls and shopping centers were a big deal.
Mhm.
And he would deflate their tires. And of course he picked a woman that was by
Mhm.
herself, you
Yep.
know, and when she would come back, she would find a car with a flat tire, and he'd come and say, "Hey, can I help you?" Like the Good Samaritan. And also, this person, of course, he made sure that he was clean cut, non-threatening. My point being that sometimes, you even in some of these trail parking lots, because I've heard of people, sometimes they're like maybe one or two other persons out there. There's not
Right.
a lot of people in the parking area, where sometimes they will do things to your vehicle, like a flat tire,
Yep.
just to, like, "Oh, you need some help? Don't worry, I can help you out, whatever." Like they, in other words, they manufacture the crisis so that they can step in
Right.
and yeah. So now that we've talked everybody out of going hiking, let me. You also wrote a book about Mothman and flying humanoids. How did you become interested in that?
So, my first book that came out was the Lake Monster book, and
Okay.
that was just because I had a love for lake monsters, and I was like, I'm finally going to write my lake monster book. And then about 2 years later, with talking with a uh, publisher that I knew, he wanted to get a Mothman book done.
Okay.
So I did write that book and published it through his company. And since then, his company has kind of gone dormant. So I'm going to retake the rights to the book and self-publish it myself. But
Okay.
it basically became like the next move up from the lake monsters was, okay, let's do the flying cryptids. So
Okay.
it's not just on Mothman, it's on all different types of flying cryptids, gargoyles and the
Yes.
snallygaster and ropins, or pterosaurs. So all these different flying cryptids that people have seen all over the Midwest, I have documented in the book
Okay.
and have talked to eyewitnesses and gotten their reports. So they are all, each creature is different, and the only thing they have in common is they've been seen flying.
Right. And I mean, the reason why I ask is that, everybody thinks of Mothman as Point Pleasant and, West
Mhm.
Virginia, but there's been these sightings in the last couple of years out of all places, Chicago.
Yeah, I don't really put too much stock into the Chicagoland Mothman, because there's seems to be one researcher who's benefiting from the eyewitness reports,
Okay.
and he will not allow any other researchers to talk to these eyewitnesses.
All right. That's not good.
Um, and so those of us who do flying cryptid reports kind of stay away from that one, because it seems to be more for the benefit of one person than it is for the whole community of cryptozoology.
Because, and the thing is this, it's, there's nothing I can think of in an urban setting that you could mistake. Like out here, we have, where I live at, I have huge owls.
Right.
Okay. I'm not saying, but in a certain, I can see where somebody could mistake it. It's huge. And I have big trees, like huge, like 500-year-old trees outside. If that thing, you see it flying in the darkness, you'd be like, oh,
Yeah.
but there's nothing I can think of in Chicago that
But
you could mistake.
and the funny thing about the Point Pleasant Mothman report is, originally the biologists, that they were bringing in, were saying, "Oh, these are extraordinarily large sandhill cranes." Okay, so we
Right.
have
No.
sand, like where I live in Michigan, we have sandhill cranes everywhere, and I'm like, yes, they do look like aliens, especially when they're walking around the yard and they're like,
Right.
they're blending in with their surroundings, except for that red patch on the top of their head. And like, but there's no way I would
You're going to mistake
confuse
it.
that with the Mothman.
Exactly.
For one,
Exactly.
they're tall, but they're very narrow. Like, there's no meat on these birds. They're
Right.
all
Right.
legs,
Right. Right. Like, yeah. One thing is
all
like,
leg and all neck.
yeah, even in bad lighting, it's like you're not going to mistake that for something
Right,
else, like a
right.
humanoid kind of creature or whatever. You can't. And that's when I hear about it, I've heard it, like around the Chicago O'Hare, and I was like, man, there's nothing out there that you could say it was this, but I thought it was. And I was like, okay, where does this come from? Because unless it's the real thing, but again, it's like you I've heard of people like I guess I'm not going to say cryptos don't ever go into an urban setting, but most of the times, the most reports you will get, it will be either rural or on the outskirts. On the way on the
Right.
outskirts of a city or a town is where sometimes then you'll start getting some reports of cryptids, whether it's flying or whatever on the ground. But yeah,
Yeah,
so
and
yeah,
that's typically what I believe is, you the cryptid creatures, any creatures they live on the fringes of society.
Yes.
meaning that they live at our lawn's edge. So
Mm-hmm.
wherever the wild parts are, the
Yes.
woods, the meadows, the fields, the rivers, the streams, the lakes, those are the wild areas. That's where creatures live.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's only occasionally that we get, glimpses like, oh, hey, there's a raccoon in the backyard. Well, Mr. Raccoon's looking for the trash can. Or, oh, hey, there's a deer. Well, it's because you're feeding the songbirds and all that,
Sure.
sunflower seed that's falling on the ground. Well, they like to eat that too.
Let me tell you
So,
something. I have the fattest squirrels in the land because everybody, everybody gets fat off my chicken feed because my chickens are free range. I put them in at night, but so yeah, oh yeah, and I'm telling you, it's like, oh, yeah, the buffet, it's going on, let's go.
yep,
Yes, so I know what you mean.
yep. My mom and dad feed the critters at their house. And it's like, oh, we've got deer out there, we've got a woodchuck, we've got squirrels, we've got,
Yeah,
chipmunks, we've got, the birds. Occasionally
yes,
a fox or a coyote shows up, to take on those, animals. So it's
yes,
like, it's always like, oh, okay, what's
yes.
out in the backyard today?
Yeah, it's because we never waste anything, even like leftover food, because we have exotic birds too. Every somebody, it's gonna get down the food chain. Somebody's
Right,
gonna eat
right.
it out here. And let me ask you, when you were doing the book for the lake monsters, and I know you told me that as a child you were fascinated, did you ever interview anybody that when you were talking to them, without you being there, that they truly believed that this is what they saw?
So for my Lake Monster report, I focused mostly on historical reports
Okay.
that were made in like the 1700s, 1800s, even early 1900s,
Okay.
back before people, even thought about hoaxing,
Yes.
because at in those time periods, what I usually say is my timestamp for reliable historical reports is pre P.T. Barnum,
Yes. Right.
before the circuses and the sideshows.
Mm-hmm.
So before P.T. Barnum, most people would not come into town or not go into the local courthouse or authorities and say, hey, there's a creature out in my field, or I was just out pulling in my fishing nets and saw this huge monster. Because one, they'd either be called crazy or, put in jail for the night for, being a drunkard or, something like that. Um, So if people were going to make these reports, it was genuinely because they were in fear for themselves, their family, their community, their livelihood, and wanted to make the rest of the town aware
Yes.
of the potential possibility for a detriment to their lifestyles to be out there. And so that is generally when these reports would be made is, hey, I was just, canoeing from, this port to that port, and this is what I saw 50 feet from my canoe.
Right.
And I just want everybody else to know, because if it's an animal that big, it can knock over people's canoes or boats, and you're going to lose everything on your boat and probably, drown.
Exactly. Yeah, but and
So,
people don't realize back then, if you got the stigma of being a liar, that thing would follow you around.
right,
It's,
right.
it's forever.
You got
30
dropped
years
off from your
later.
community and move like 100 miles away or 50 miles away.
Yes, exactly.
So, generally people wanted to make the reports because they were in fear for their lives and
Mm-hmm.
in fear for their community or their livelihood, and they wanted the whole town to know, just in case something started happening.
Right. Or they
And
were so wigged out that they'd be like, come
right,
down here. I want you to see it. I want you to see what I saw. Or,
right,
you know,
because generally that meant everybody was showing up with their pitchforks,
yeah,
guns, you
exactly.
know uh, you know anything that they could do damage to the creature with, in hopes of fending it off. So
Right.
it wasn't really, people didn't just make these reports to, get attention. because that was like the last thing they wanted to do.
And
Nowadays, everybody's like,
oh
"Oh,
no,
I've seen a ghost, or I've seen a dog man, or I've seen Bigfoot," and to me, it's like it's not normal if you haven't seen something like that in
right,
today's day and age. And people who deny that they're out there, it's like, oh, you've seen something, you just don't want to admit it. You just
right. Well, you know what? There's and I remember I interviewed this gentleman. He says since passed on. His name was Jim Smith, and he ran the Alabama Bigfoot Society since like the 1970s. And he says that he got to the point where people would see things like a run across the road, and they
mhm.
would call the police, and the police would go like, "What do you want us to do?" So what the police would end up doing is they would take the people over to his place and say, "Look, this is no criminal, but talk to this man, and you can tell him your story." And he told me, he goes, "Marlene, I don't know what they saw, but I will tell you something. They whatever they saw, they believed. They were
Yes,
scared." He says they were truly frightened. And he said, "I had a couple of people that even said, 'Look, sir, can we stay here until daybreak? We don't want to travel back on the road at night.'" He says, "I don't know what they saw, but what they saw, they believed that they had
right.
seen something that was not a bear, a deer, any of the usual suspects. They were profoundly frightened, you know."
Yeah, and that is something that law enforcement is just not trained to
It's
handle.
like, what do you want us to do? It's like,
What are they going to do against, like, a ghost, or
yeah,
a Bigfoot or a dog man? They might shoot at the Bigfoot or the dog man, but
right.
what are you going to do against a ghost? That's a whole nother realm of, like,
Yes.
paranormal authority that you have to, get in touch
Yes.
with and have that dealt with. And you know, I have I have friends who are police officers who do paranormal investigatings. They do
Hmm.
Bigfooting, and they're like, yeah, this stuff's out there. And, but the norm is they don't want to acknowledge it. They don't want to talk about it because they are not trained in how to handle it.
Right. No, I have heard of police getting reports of strange, whether it's a poltergeist activity. We're talking here in a controlled environment, like a house,
Yep.
or in a building, not. And they've gone there, and they've witnessed things like either pounding or certain
Yep.
knockings, and that they don't know what to do. Like, how do I handle a
Right.
parent? There was one gentleman. He wasn't a police officer any longer, but at one point he was talking about, as a rookie, they said that they had a family that was known for having a domestic violence incident. So that when a call came in, it was like, oh, those people. Okay, they had children and everything. They lived in a two-story home, and he says that as a rookie, he went with his training off, two-man team. So they go out there, and he says they go in there, and he says that he says the parents and the kids were all sitting on the sofa with this look of like they're terrorized, and they say that they hear from upstairs like arguing and somebody having a fight, like multitude of people, and
Wow.
they're asking the father, "Who's up there?" And he's like, "There's nobody up there." And the because he says he was observing, he was like the guy in the back, and the guy's like, "Don't lie to me, tell me who's up there," because they're hearing all of this upstairs. And he ends up going upstairs. He tells the partner, "Stay here with them, because in case, we don't know what this is." But they were all sitting there on the sofa, like. And he says that he went upstairs, and he says that when he reached the top step, it's just stopped. It went
Right.
to zero, nothing. Then it was like, okay, somebody switches it off.
Oh, yeah.
And he says he went up there with his gun drawn, and he says he checked every inch up there, and he says there was nothing. And he came back down, and it was like, he's like, "There's nothing up there. There's nobody up there. There's nowhere to hide. I checked them." And he says that family, like within a couple of weeks, they moved away from the house. They moved. And
Does not surprise me in the least.
he says, like, how do you handle, and that they were, in other words, it wasn't like I was the only one that witnesses. They both were there,
Hmm.
but they couldn't. It's like, how do I, well, I guess we'll just report what. But yeah, I've heard of police officers and first responders and people like that but like you said, they're not equipped to, like, besides being a witness to it, it's like, what else do you want me to do?
Yeah, because their response would be, well, contact your local clergy. you
Sometimes
know?
it can leave you high and dry. I hate to say that.
Yeah,
Sometimes it works out, unless it all depends on the individual who's at the receiving end.
right,
And because I mean, I was doing paranormal investigations since the 1990s, and I came across people who they ended up doing that. Because I tell everybody back in when I started doing it, if anybody had strange noises, they on their own they would call the electrician, the plumber, the
hmm,
handyman, the landlord, anybody that they could think of, because they would always try to think, okay, it's a pipe, it's
right,
something. By the time they called in somebody on a spiritual angle, they were at their wits' end. Now, and I tell everybody, nowadays somebody hears a strange noise and the whole family runs outside and sleeps in the car because, of course, it's a ghost. Nobody calls the electrician, or the plumber or whatever, the AC guy. But anyway, um, the thing is this, that the as far as the dynamics go, as far as the paranormal and stuff like that, when it comes to, how can I say, it's not an on-demand thing. Like when you have even a police or anybody go in there, you can't reproduce it on demand.
right, hmm,
Like the repairman, the TV repairman, it's fine until the repairman gets there, and then it's fine.
right.
Same thing. Um, and have you, I know you do paranormal investigations. Have you run across any crazy incidents like that?
I've had a couple of different ones, and the two that stick out in my mind the most, one happened up in Mackinac City, which is the gateway to Mackinac Island. You have to take a
Okay.
ferry from either Mackinac City or St. Ignace to get to Mackinac Island, which is huge tourist destination here in Michigan. So it was, geez, I want to say 5 years ago. It was
Okay.
way before COVID. My mom had come back to Michigan to go to her high school's 50th golden graduation. I believe that was
Wow.
the year 50th. So she had flown back, and I was going to drive her back up to Ely, Minnesota with her German Shepherd and the rest of the stuff that she wanted to take up to Ely. And I had my little miniature pinscher with me. And so we stopped in Mackinac City, and she wanted to get fudge and taffy and stuff like that. Mackinac City's known, and Mackinac
Okay.
Island is known for their fudge and their saltwater taffy. Those are the two
Okay.
things that everybody has to get from there. So as she was doing that, this was June. And so I had my little miniature picture with me, and I was walking around, and we went to a couple little, cutesy tchotchke stores, and I got her a little turquoise sweater to match me, and her hiking harness and lead and collar were all teal. So there is one public bathroom at the one end of the strip of stores that is across from the ferries. So I went in there into the large bathroom stall
Okay.
and had her with me. And then we left, got back on the road. So fast forward a couple months, and I'm actually stopping at Mackinac City from coming from my Paracon, that one of the biggest paranormal conventions in the United States up in Sault Ste. Marie. And I had stopped in Mackinac City so that I could get um, my saltwater taffy and my fudge for my dad and my brothers. And I go into that same bathroom. Now, I do not have my dog with me at this time.
Okay.
Let's make that perfectly clear. And as I'm about to leave the stall, as my hand is on the latch to open up the door and walk out to wash my hands, a voice as clear as day says, "What? No puppy this time?"
Whoa.
It was so loud and clear that I started answering back, "No, she's at home." Huh.
Oh my. And did it sound like a woman or a man's voice?
That was the interesting thing. It really didn't register male or female, but
Okay.
it was a voice. And so I walked out of the bathroom stall to see if anybody else was in there, and every stall door was open. So I quickly walked outside. There was nobody anywhere near the bathrooms. So I'm like, so my friend Todd Clemmings runs the paranormal tour, walking tour on Mackinac Island. So I see him at an event, a paranormal event, a couple of months
Uh-huh.
later, and I'm like, Todd, let me tell you this. So he's like, well, it might be the ghost from there, here or there. And I'm like, Todd, that's not the point. The
It's the
point is,
bathroom
it
ghost.
remembered me, and it remembered my little dog. He said, well, she is a really cute little dog. I said, I
No.
don't know. All the thousands of people who go through Mackinac City a day, it remembered and recognized me from early June to late August and interacted with me because I didn't have my little dog with me at that time.
And what did he say?
He said, well, yeah, they do that. And I'm like,
What was in the vicinity of the bathroom?
the bathroom is actually, it stands, I want to say about 30 feet from the very last storefront on that side of the street. It's totally by itself. It's
Freeze,
not
freeze.
connected to anything. It's right on the corner of two streets. And
Uh-huh.
then you have to walk across the street to, um, if you want to go to the ferries, you'd have to walk across the street to where the parking lot is and where the ship docks for the ferries are.
That's incredible.
So it's not, there was no surveillance cameras or
Right,
speaker
no.
system or anything in the bathroom
But the
that I
thing
could
is this,
see.
that even if you heard something, the fact that it's talking about something that happened a couple of months
Yep.
as reference, it would be like, okay,
So
wow.
that one was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Um, now every time I go in there, I'm like, are you gonna talk to me? Are you gonna talk to me? Should I
Like
put my I'm gonna put my phone on, recorder and
yeah,
nope,
exactly.
nothing. So and then the second weird one that I had happen, and both of these actually happened, either because I had my dog with me, or when I had my dog with me. So the second one, I had gone down to the Mothman Festival and I was spending the weekend at a friend of mine's cabin with him and his family and a group of friends, because we were all going back and forth to the Mothman Festival Friday and Saturday. And then I was leaving Sunday morning to go hiking at Hocking Hills. So the first night that I stayed there, me and several other people stayed upstairs in the cabin, had my little dog with me, and in the little offshoot room that I was in, I was on one side of the room, and then there was another author, another lady, on the other side of the room, and then in the next alcove was a mother and daughter, an adult mother and daughter, and then in the other alcove was another gentleman. So Friday night, we're all hanging out and talking, and he has Bigfoot activity around there, so we're talking about the Bigfoots and stuff like that. And they really never mentioned to me that his cabin was haunted.
Holy.
So everything goes fine. And I spend the whole next day at Mothman Festival with my dog, and it's 90 degrees, and we're walking around with, her in her stroller, and we do all the Mothman Festival stuff, going to the
Uh-huh.
museum and going on the bus tour and eating all the food and talking to all the vendors and authors and speakers and everything. So by the time I get back to their house, I'm exhausted.
I bet.
So I have dinner and drink a couple, of iced teas, and then I go back up to bed. Well, the woman who had been my roommate, so to speak, had gone home that night. So it's just me and my dog in that alcove.
Oh boy, are you about
So
to find out about the ghost?
so
Oh my god.
all of my, like, my all of my like my change of clothes and everything, and uh whatnot is
Yes.
in a tote bag sitting in a rocking chair in the middle of the alcove between the two beds. And
Okay.
on the top of that bag, open tote bag, I had a bottle of ibuprofens because I took a couple before I went to bed. Now, as I was falling asleep, I had my back to the rocking chair. So it was, maybe a single size bed,
Mm-hmm.
like a bunk bed, but just, one. So I had my back to the rocking chair, and then my little dog was in between me and the wall. And about 3 a.m., I am awoken out of a good sleep, and I just had this icy chill go through my body. And right about the time that that wave of iciness goes through my body, my little miniature pincher starts growling.
Mm.
And then we both hear the bottle of ibuprofen start rattling back and forth, like somebody's playing with it.
Oh boy.
And this went on for a good 15 seconds.
That was a bit
And as much as I wanted to turn over and see who was messing with my stuff, the fact that my dog could not see over my side and she was growling at it told
Mm-hmm.
me, do not turn over.
Right.
So it wasn't until it stopped and I waited a good 2 minutes that I turned over and looked, and the rocking chair was still. Nothing was, behind me. And so I got up with her and we went down. We used, the restroom, which was, down the stairs. And then
Uh-huh.
we came back up and I waited for a few minutes to see if anything else was going to happen. And nothing did. So I got her back to sleep. And then the next morning, the mother and daughter had gotten up, and I just wanted to check and see. I said, "Oh, were you guys feeling okay last night? I heard you get up and were taking your medication or something, but I didn't want to bother you if you weren't having any issues." And they said, "No, we heard something rattling, but it wasn't us." I said, "Yeah, I think something was playing with my ibuprofen bottle." And the daughter said, "Oh, well, didn't they tell you there's a little boy ghost who lives here?" And I'm like,
You're like,
need to know information,
yeah, exactly.
before you're falling asleep. That's something you should probably warn people about, just in case, random things start happening throughout the night. So it wasn't a vicious or
Right, but still.
evil spirit, but still, that's like when you
Yeah,
wake up to that, you're like,
exactly. And when your back is to it, of all things,
mm-hmm.
because your imagination goes wild.
Oh yeah. And so, it was, those two things were just like, okay,
Let me tell you
and
something. Those are, and you know what's really good is when you have a ghost experience, not expecting it. You didn't go
right.
in there like you
Oh
said,
my God.
knowing it's a haunted cabin.
And that's how always, for me, that's always how it happens. Even when I'm on paranormal investigations and
Hmm.
I've got like the recorders out and everything, it's when I turn the recorder off to do something. So, case
Yes.
in point, I was in Winchester, Indiana no, it wasn't this last summer, it was the summer before. And at the, now I can't remember the name of it. It's the Insane Asylum in Winchester, Indiana,
Okay.
Randolph County Asylum. And I normally try to investigate on my own. And we had a pretty big group that night, which wasn't a problem because Randolph County is huge. So I
Okay.
was in the basement where the kitchen was, and there was nobody else down there with me. And one of the reports of the kitchen is that the old cook that was, who was there, she was mentally handicapped,
Okay.
but she was very spiritual. So people have left throughout the years. They've left hymnals and money and stuff like that for her. So I was down there and I was trying to remember the lyrics of a hymnal that I used to always sing that I really liked. And so I sang a couple of verses of it and I was like, nope, that's not how it goes. So, and I'm going to spell it out because if I say the word, it's going to activate on my phone or the one behind me. And so I said Goggle.
Uh-huh.
What is the name of this hymnal? And I sang the lyrics.
Right.
And the response I got back from my cell phone was, you cook pork at 350 degrees for 45 minutes to an hour.
You're like, what?
And I looked and I was like, that
Huh?
that isn't even close to what I asked.
Because I know
And
every
then,
once in a while it throws stuff at you that you're like, wait,
and
what?
like my phone's usually pretty accurate with answering the questions that I ask it. And I'm like, but wait, I'm in the kitchen and this kitchen is haunted by a woman who was the cook. She's
Mm-hmm.
mentally handicapped, and I'm sure on different occasions she's seen people ask these devices that we hold in our hands questions and it
Right.
responds. And this was right, like, I think 2 days before 4th of July.
Okay.
So in her mind, she was probably getting ready to cook a big meal
Sure.
for 4th of July, and she couldn't remember how to cook pork. So I'm
That's
assuming that she took that opportunity to ask my phone, how do you cook, pork?
right.
And it responded to her. So I had to, and of course, I'm not recording what I'm expecting my phone to answer my
And let
question.
me ask you something. What years was that asylum active? From what year?
Mm,
Was it one of those like old ones, like post Civil War? You know those
I think it was,
huge.
I think it was active up into the 1980s
Oh, really? Okay, it's one of those that
because
was
from what we could see, it had modern.
okay. Appliances and things.
Well, it had modern bathroom facilities like,
Okay.
bathtub and showers and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The cells were in pretty good condition. The appliances down in the kitchen, they had a walk-in freezer.
Okay.
They had ovens, stuff like that. So most of that, still looked like it was, could just be, turned on, right now and
Right.
used. So I would
Yeah.
say, probably 1980s.
Okay. Okay.
But
So that see, let me tell you something. Those even when you're ghost hunting, sometimes things get thrown at you that you're like, what?
I know, and on a totally like different occasion, this was, man, I want to say this was at least 10 years ago. Me and my aunt and my cousin had gone to the Monroe County Historical Museum, which used to be General Custer's home.
Okay.
And we went in, just to walk around and stuff like that, because we also wanted to go to the battlefield near there because that was rumored to be haunted. That you
Okay.
would hear cannons going off and you'd see shapes moving across the field. So, we pay the $2.50 admission and we're walking through and looking at all the exhibits. And we come up to a bust of Abraham Lincoln. And my aunt asked my cousin, who I think she was in her late 20s at the time, she said, do you know who that is? And my cousin was looking at it. She was like, um, and just as I was about to say Abraham Lincoln, a very prim and proper voice, very assertively said, "That's President Abraham Lincoln."
Like,
And we were like, "Oh, we're sorry." And we're looking around, and we're looking around, and we're like, "There's nobody else in this room." At which point, I'm like, "Bingo!" Walk up front, and and the
uh-huh.
woman working at the counter, we're like, "We have a question." And she's like, and she's
Sure.
like, and we're like, "Is this place haunted?" And she's like, "Yes, Mrs. Custard likes to make her presence known." And we're like, "Yeah, we were just," and she's like, "Abraham Lincoln." She's like, "I heard him." I said, "Oh, okay."
Oh.
She said, "Normally what happens is women will come in
Uh-huh.
and they will go into the restroom. It's a multi-stall restroom. And as they are washing their hands and getting ready to leave, a woman in period attire is just suddenly there in the room. And they'll talk to her and, "Oh, you look so wonderful." And, "Wow, that's a very nice, outfit." And she indulges them and, "Oh, well, yes,
Uh-huh.
this is my finest attire." And, and
And they
the
just think, oh, she's just
they
doing the
just
play
think
act.
they just think she's a curator or somebody there, a
Uh-huh.
reenactor there at the museum. And so as they go up to the front counter when they're about to leave, they'll say, oh, we just loved meeting that, actress that you had, who's in period attire, but we couldn't find her anywhere else in the museum to talk to her. And the staff would be like, that's really not someone we hire. That's just Mrs. Custard. And she shows up whenever she wants to. And so that was, once again, didn't have any recorders out, didn't, because, we're not expecting anything at the museum. And it was just like, nope. She wanted us to know that that was President Abraham
That
Lincoln.
is, you know what? And that's the thing. Mostly the people that work at these places, the docents or the whatever, they're the ones that get the best stories because
Oh, yes.
they hear and they see things, especially either before it opens or after it closes down. And it's like, okay, whoever draws the short straw is the one that gets to
Right.
close this place down
Oh, yeah.
because they witness a lot of stuff.
Yeah. My friend and I, we did the haunted tour of the Kentucky Horse Park back in, I want to say it was late October. And the tour, itself was fun and interesting. We knew most of the history of the park because my friend is a racehorse and horse world fanatic, because she's shown horses and she knows all their stories. But the interesting thing was when we got to the museum part and they were having like the little meet and greet afterwards with fruit and snacks, and hearing the caretakers and the docents talk about the actual paranormal history.
Yeah.
And the stuff they've experienced there. And the one gentleman was like, oh, I'll tell you, he's like, I was here one night and I was downstairs working, finishing up one of the exhibits. There was nobody else in the building, he said, and I heard a toilet flush in the men's bathroom. I heard the faucet go on. Then I heard the hand dryer go on. And I'm standing there waiting for somebody to come out of the bathroom for me to say, hey, you could have let me know you were in the building. He's like, and I wait and I wait. So I finally go in and the bathroom is totally empty. The lights are even off.
And then he promptly left.
Yes. And he said they used to have a cleaning crew that they all quit. One by one, they all quit because what would happen is they would get halfway through their shift and the payphone downstairs would start ringing.
Oh, jeez.
So they would, they would answer it and be like, hello, who's there? And there would be nothing. So they would purposely, leave it off the hanger. And sometimes the phone would start ringing again.
I can imagine. No wonder they quit. They were like, nah.
Oh, nah. Yeah. And so they were like, and then there's an old homestead house on the property. And they do have police that are stationed there 24 hours because when you have animals that are a value of $50,000 or $50 million or, whatever living there, you have, round the clock police service. And they said that the officers just got to the point where they knew that one of the buildings was haunted and they would go in, they would make their checks, and then that was it. Because what would happen is they would start their shift and the lights in the building would be off. And then at some point in the night, as they were making their rounds, the lights would be on in the building. So they would go in, they would do a full building check, turn off all the lights, lock it back up, leave. And when they would come back within a half an hour, all the lights would be back on. And they're like, okay, we know it's a ghost.
Yeah. It's like, what do you want us to do? Those are the people, usually the ones that are there all the time that it's like,
It's like,
they can't help it. It's like they got to witness it no matter what because they work there.
Yep. And I'm like, oh, I want to stand and talk to these people. And my friend's like, but it's 9:30 at night. I'm like, yeah, but they're the ones who are going to tell us the real paranormal stuff. And so we got to talk to them a little bit. And then, it's like, okay, we'll leave. I know you guys are tired.
You know what? There's a place down in Louisville, and once upon a time it was called Millionaires Row. It was like, where a lot of the what they call the new minted
Yep.
land barons, bourbon
Yep.
baron, but everybody was making money hand over fist. They built their big mansions out there. This is one that they built a big mansion, and a couple of families lived there. And, of course, back then people don't realize people would die at home. That was like the norm.
Right.
It's not like now that, most people die in a hospital. Back then it was
Yep.
normal to die at home. So of course, and then for a while, for like 30 or 40 years, I want to say, it was used as a resting home for unmarried Episcopalian women.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
And then, of course, afterwards, they became like a museum, and they use it for events and stuff. And it's really funny because they were talking exactly like, the ghost stories and
Uh-huh.
happenings and people running and seeing things like at events. They've had weddings and people will see somebody upstairs, or they'll go into what was the billiards room. They'll smell some cigar smoke. But what's really funny is that everybody always looks at the two original families, that were well off, that built it and
Mhm.
lived there and it's like, no, a lot of the stuff, believe it or not, comes from those very Episcopalian ladies that
Yep.
lived and died there. Nobody wants to think, but just because they were old Episcopalian and never got married, you never know what drama they had in their lives. As far as being the source of the
Right.
different hauntings that they've going on there. Because I don't know if it's because people tend to think, oh, well, the guy that was rich and his family, and is like, no, those ladies, who
Right.
knows what went on
Right.
with them, because they were going there. And it was funny because I had never seen it. They had Episcopalian, had to be unmarried. And this was like, a resting home, I guess, if you didn't have family or any place that you could go to. And I was like, man, who knows what mischief they got up to or had got up to by the time they ended up there. And now they're haunting the place. But yeah, sometimes you have the usual suspects, and sometimes it's
Right.
who you least expect is the source of whatever is causing whatever. That's it's a toss up. Sometimes, you can't always, especially in these historical places, how they have this family
Oh,
or
yeah.
this history that's what it is.
Well, there was um not this past June, but June 2021, I did a road trip through Gettysburg, Maryland, New
Hmm.
York, Vermont, because I was going to Lake Champlain to investigate for Champ. But a friend of mine who I had interviewed for my magazines and for my podcast, and I had been on his podcast, co-owned and he still does uh, the Hoover House in Waynesboro, Pennsylvania, which is
Okay.
haunted.
Okay.
And so they gifted me I believe it was a 3-night stay while I was there in Gettysburg, doing different, tours and stuff like that for my magazines. And so the first night that I was there, I had gone and met my friends in Gettysburg, had dinner. We walked around town a bit, and then I went back. And as it would happen, they were filming something for a documentary in the house. So I just
Okay.
went up to my room and I had my 3 little dogs with me. We took the service elevator up. And so my friend starts texting me wanting to set up, for the next day. So I make sure my dogs are, comfortable, because they had to stay either in their stroller or their crate, which I understand it's a bed and breakfast and I wasn't going to let them run around and trash the place. So they were very well behaved in their stroller and their crate. And the room that I went in and was staying in had this closet that I guess that a lot of people do EVP work in. So I had put my
Okay.
recorder, my little sound recorder, in the closet with it open. And then I was sitting on the bed texting my friend. Now I had put my equipment case for my paranormal
Hmm.
gear
Okay.
on the little side table right across from me. And it was on a
Okay.
level surface. So as I'm sitting there texting with my friend, out of the corner of my eye, I see that my equipment case is being pushed forward
Ooh.
to the edge of the table. And I was not in the mood to put up with this crap right then because
Right.
I was trying to be quiet because they're filming downstairs and my friend keeps texting me. And just as the case is about to come flying off of the edge of the table, I put my hand up against it and I stopped it and I said, knock your shit off right now. I'm not in the
Wow.
mood for this crap. And then I pushed, the case all the way back to the back of the table.
Okay.
And then it was quiet. So I left the EVP, or the recorder going all night. And
Okay.
before I left in the morning, I grabbed it and turned it off so that it stopped the recording and saved it as a file. Got the dogs ready, got myself ready because we were doing the whole day in Gettysburg. And it was about 8 a.m. And because it was a bed and breakfast, they said, oh, well, we serve breakfast. So as I'm taking the service elevator down and I come out into the hallway that goes immediately into the kitchen, I can hear what I think is everybody in the dinner area, the bar area, talking and everything like that. So I'm like, okay, I'll come back in and grab something to eat, but I'm going to take the dogs outside, potty them first, and feed them, water them. So I do that. And I heard voices, I heard dishes, I heard, activity going on in that room. And it didn't occur to me as I walked through the industrial kitchen that I didn't smell any food or anything. Nobody was in the kitchen. So I take the dogs out. I do, get them all set up. And luckily my truck is a F-250 truck, which has a huge back seat, but it also has a outside locking keypad. So turned on the truck, made sure they had AC while they're eating their breakfast. I'm only going to be 10 minutes in there, lock the doors from the outside, walk back into the kitchen. I can still hear activity. And I go walking through the double doors, expecting to see everybody in there. And I'm like, hi guys, I'm getting, I'm on my way out, but I wanted to say hi. Dead silence. There's not a person in the room. There's nobody else in the house. And I'm like, oh,
How did this happen?
I'm like, and then the realization hits me, I don't smell any food cooked. And so I actually did, I explored floor by floor for like 10 minutes. Nobody else was in the house. And I'm like, well, crap. So I leave, we go do the Gettysburg stuff. I come back that night, I do a podcast with them. The next day we go to Maryland. And then I come back and they're like, oh, we want to do a table tipping session with you. I'm like, great, but can I take a bath first? Because I smell like Chesapeake Bay. They're like, oh, yeah. They're like, well, we're going to go do an investigation. You get cleaned up and everything. And then when we come back. So we do this hour-long table tipping session afterwards. And these tables were not light. They weighed about 30 pounds. And there was 4 of us sitting around and I had my fingers underneath the table, because you're supposed to lightly put your fingers underneath the table and the table will rock when it, and it was answering our questions and it was responding to us and it wasn't the guys doing it.
Did anybody else have their own experiences or was it just you?
They had activity there all the time. And so my last night there, I was telling them all the things that I had experienced and they're like, well, when did that happen? I'm like, well, last night or, yesterday morning. And they're like, man, the stuff is active there all year round. So
but that's incredible that you're thinking. See, that's the thing, that when you witness it, you're not thinking paranormal. You're just thinking.
Right. But I did know that. So the past history of the building was it had been a family home that was turned into a convalescent home and then turned into a restaurant. And then the restaurant didn't do very well, so they closed it. And then my friend and his business partners bought it and turned it into a bed and breakfast. And now it's a haunted bed and breakfast. And they run paranormal tours out of there and paranormal walks out of there. And it's like the perfect location for them. But I'm like, you guys hit the nail on the head with that because it is haunted. And you're going to get activity. If you stay there for 2 nights, you will definitely have something happen.
Something's going to happen.
You're like, what the hell was that? You know?
Yeah. And
And
some
then
I
so
remember one time this was I was going cross country. I was taking something into my son who was stationed in California, and a friend of mine flew in from California so she could drive with me, and she was going to fly back. Like what? And I would just fly back to Florida, and I stayed at this place, which a lot of these. It was in this old town called Monticello in northern Florida. It's one of these towns that has a lot of Victorian style houses.
okay.
One of these. It ended up, where people make it into like a bed and breakfast,
Yep.
and we were coming in late, and they didn't even have anybody. Said, "We'll leave you the key. Go in." Once upon a time, though, it did serve as a funeral home because
Oh.
everybody thinks of funeral homes as being your typical funeral home, but sometimes people would live in the actual.
Yep.
They were the funeral director, but they would
Yep.
live at the funeral home kind of thing. But that didn't even. And I remember my friend. We were the only ones staying in there, the only ones. And I mean, we rolled in late, so we were like exhausted. And she took one bedroom, I took the other. Was like whatever. And they said, "We'll send a girl in the morning, and she'll cook breakfast for you, whatever you want." There was nobody there. And I remember it was morning, was out, and I heard a man say, "Marlene," that I sat up in bed, like I heard it clearly, Marlene, because when you're asleep at night, you're already like, I'm all right. That I just sat up because to me it was like, in that moment, it was like, who is that?
Right.
I'm thinking it didn't sound like my friend, but so I go looking for her. She's outside smoking. It wasn't even that you could say, well, maybe she called me and
Right.
Hey, you guys, cool it. Can you tell that that you could hear it was like right in the same room as me. It was a big room, but that you could hear it.
Right.
And that was the only thing I experienced there. I mean, after what we had to leave because we had to keep on going in the road. But sometimes it's stuff like that it's like, and whatever it is knew my name because it said my name very clearly. And it was like, okay. When I went downstairs, I'm like, hey, so and so. And I'm going, and finally I find her outside. They had this little garden, and she's out there smoking. And I was like, did you worry? She goes, no, I've been sitting out here. I'm just smoking. I'm waiting for the girl to come and make us breakfast. And I'm like, you're not going to believe it, but I just heard a man call my name, and she's like, oh. But yeah. And that was, by the way, that was broad daylight. That was it was full morning. Nothing had happened. And I'm going to tell you another story about Gettysburg. There's a little motel. I'm not even going to call it a hotel. It's a motel. It's a one-story motel, and it's right across the street from the Union Cemetery. Because know that over there in Gettysburg, they do have a Union Cemetery.
Yes. The
motel's been around for a while, but it's a very simple one-story motel kind of deal. What is it? The triple? Wait, I'm making up names. Let me not do that. But anyway, we were staying there, and we rolled into Gettysburg late at night. One of those deals where you just got there, check in, and it's your typical motel room. You got your bed, your vanity area, and then the bathroom door. And my boyfriend, he was a cop, a no-nonsense cop. Well, he pretended he was a no-nonsense cop. So, okay, we were tired. It was like, yeah, we were going to. Yep. And that night, I have this really weird dream that I see what looks like modern day, one of the people that clean your room.
Okay.
That pushing those little carts with all this stuff. I have this dream where she comes out of like a cloud. She says something. My name is Maria. And then she looks like she's looking at me, and she goes, "Oh, you they're checking you out." It was such a weird dream, but I could tell this is like, oh. The next morning, I'm getting this stink eye from my boyfriend, and he's like, I don't understand. Didn't you hear that toilet flushing all night long? And I was like, what? I was like, no. He goes, you slept through that. He's like, oh, I'm mad because he's the one that's witnessing. He says he didn't even dare go in there. I mean, the toilet, the bathroom was right there. I didn't wake up. I was tired. I was just having this really weird dream. And he's all upset because he's hear this toilet flushing, and he's not about to get up and find out what's causing the. So the next morning, of course, I go, Go ask him. So off he goes. As a matter of fact, it was really funny because this room was right next to the office. When you pull into these motels, that the office is right there at the entrance. So off he goes, and he comes back and goes, "You're not going to believe it." And I go, let's hear it. And he goes, "They told us this is one of the most haunted rooms in the motel." I said, "I want you to go back and ask them if one of the ghosts is a cleaning lady." And he looked at me and he goes, "What?" I said, "Go ahead and ask him." And off he goes. He comes back and he goes, "How did you know? How did you know?" I said, "Yeah, because I saw this in a dream, whatever,
Yeah.
paranormal, whatever. She was checking me out or yes out.
Hmm.
And I guess she was flushing the toilet while she was here." And he was just like all upset, like, "You didn't wake up. You're supposed to be the paranormal investigator, and I'm the one listening to the toilet flushing." But yeah, sometimes you have this weird paranormal encounters. And my point being that everybody goes to Gettysburg
Hmm.
thinking they're going to have the sightings of a
Yep.
soldier or something from the Civil War era. And sometimes things show up that have nothing whatsoever to do with with what you expect,
Right.
as far as a paranormal experience. But yeah, Shetan, it has been absolutely wonderful to talk to you. I've enjoyed it so much.
Oh,
You
you're
have,
welcome. And I loved being on the show.
that was great. Are
It's
you
fun.
planning any books or anything? Anything that you're
So
working on?
I produce 5 magazines
Oh,
quarterly.
okay.
So I concentrate on those.
Okay.
I keep on saying I'm going to do a couple more books, but honestly, I write so much with
It's
the magazines
it's time consuming. Yes,
that is my full-time job.
I believe it.
And I'm also, I do presentations at paracons, libraries, museums. I do
Hmm.
podcast interviews. So pretty much my
Yes.
hobby is my career, and
Yeah.
I love it. So, but my magazines are Squatch GQ magazine,
Hmm.
Cryptozoology Digest,
Okay.
Into the Liminal Abyss Paranormal Magazine, which
Okay.
covers paranormal, ufology, high strangeness, weird travels, all that good stuff. Then Dinosauria and Prehistoric Creatures Magazine. And the newest one is Rock Hound and Prospector Magazine. So those
Yes.
are all available on Amazon as individual purchases, either printed copies or Kindle
Okay.
e-reader version. Um, Depending on what Paracon or event I'm at, it's hit or miss what stock I have with me.
Right, because those
Because
paracons were put on hold during COVID, and they're coming
yes,
back now.
yes.
Yeah.
So now I usually try to carry all the titles with me, but the more magazines I produce, the harder it is to, carry,
Sure.
all of them. So I usually just stick to the real popular ones, that sell out really fast.
Hmm.
So, but people can find them on Amazon. All you have to do is type in Squatch GQ magazine, and that will bring up all of the magazines that I just mentioned. If
Okay.
you want my books, because I have the cryptozoology books, I have field research journals, which are just blank journals with information structures where you can put in different information if you're doing field investigations. And I
Okay.
also have some pagan books on there about hoodoo magic.
Okay.
If anybody's interested in folk magic or hoodoo magic, I do have some very nice, uh, easy read books in there. So for those, you just type in my name, Shetan Noir, and that will bring up the books.
It's been absolutely great to talk to you. Good luck on all your projects. My God,
Well, thank
you're a
you.
one busy lady. Oh,
I try to be. I try to keep myself busy because
yeah,
it's what keeps me going.
absolutely. Absolutely. Again, thank you so much. It has been a pleasure to have you on. And I hope you're going to come back so we can talk some more.
Oh, I would love to come back on your show at any time. So just whenever you want, just let me know.
Thank you so
We'll
much.
set
Take
it up.
care.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Wow. See, another guest that I could spend hours and hours talking to because, yeah, a woman after my own heart. Man, she's busy. And yeah, check out those magazines and Amazon or, you can look her as Shetan Noir. I'm going to have a links to her website on the credits of the show, but for the podcast listeners, if you want to find, you know, as far as, what's happening in those different fields, you know, everybody has sometimes their favorites. And yeah, let me tell you something. And she looks like she does a lot of the investigations firsthand, which is great. And uh, again, like I've mentioned before, life goes on. There's like we were talking about, we went through 2 years of COVID and all the crazy stuff that goes on in the world. But you always got to leave a little part of your, I don't know if you want to call it your entertainment or your time or whatever, for stuff that's outside of all this turbulent stuff. If you want to call it the real world, even though this is the real world also. Okay, because life goes on. All these things still go on. They don't pause, even though, I guess, in the, what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe in this scheme of things, other news on the world theater seems more important or more pressing. I'm not trying to be dismissive of that, but I think that all of us need to take a time off. If you're one of these people sometimes that's very much into following the news, what I'm talking about, it's like, you need to shelve that for a little while, because I think if not, you kind of go crazy and delve into this, whether you're a true believer or you just find it entertaining or funny or just like, oh, those people are kooky. You need to put that aside. I think to keep a perspective on life, because all of the different facets of life still go on. They still go on, um, regardless of what things I want to say. Sometimes we uh, what they call fear porn, where everything that if you take it in, everything is so apocalyptic. Dare I use that word? And I'm not going to say things are not serious, but if you go back through history, there's been times where the news or what's coming seems apocalyptic and of life, whatever, and it passes, it's handled, yet people wig out a little bit. Sometimes bad things happen. I'm not saying it doesn't. But here we are, 2023. Like I said, for those of us who are old enough to have lived through Y2K, all right? Y2K. Oh, if you were an adult, you went from the people that were like, oh, maybe the computers will go down to it was like the end of society as we know it. The computers are going to crash. The economy was going to crash because everything with the computers was going to crash and nothing was going to work and planes couldn't fly. And it was the end of that's it. Life as you knew it. And nothing happened. All right. As a matter of fact, I really, I personally think that when we had the 9/11 attacks, that's really what put us into the 21st century as far as events that drastically changed life, especially here in the United States, was the terrorist attack on 9/11, which I, I was at work. I was at work. And I remember I used to, work in a booth in a cubicle. And the girl that sat on the cubicle across from me, or in other words, that we shared a wall, she always used to have her little radio on and she would play her stuff. All of a sudden, she pops her head up over the thing. She goes, "Marlene, listen to this." I was like, "What? What?" And remember, this was early in the morning when they had the first thing. What was it? Was it the Pentagon? I can't remember. And she goes, "Listen to this, listen to this." And they had interrupted her radio show. She was listening. She had like a pop music, radio station. And they're talking about we've had these reports of attacks, and you see everybody like putting their heads up, because of course there's people out there that were listening, had stuff going on. And it was like so eerie, because in that moment nobody knew what was happening. Nobody knew what was happening. And all the phone lines, if any, most of they were so jammed that you couldn't get a call out. All right. uh I had two kids in high school that I couldn't get a hold of. I couldn't get a hold of anybody to find out. And I remember my supervisor, he was so wigged out. He was an ex-military guy. And I went up to him, I'm like, oh. And he goes, "You need to go back to your booth and sit down, Marlene. And I was like, I'm not kidding you. I was ready to grab my purse and run out the front door because I was thinking of my kids. Remember, I lived in South Florida, Miami, and all this stuff was happening in the Northeast, New York, Pennsylvania, stuff like that. But it was like at that moment, you didn't know what is going on. What is going on? And it took all my willpower to do that, to go back and sit down. But I was like, any minute, I'm going to bolt out the front door, and I don't care if I get fired. Okay. And looking back, I realized he was so wigged out. He didn't know. He was falling back on what to do. And then, of course, in about a couple of hours, they told us, go home, just go home, you know. And my point being that even that event at that moment, it was so momentous. And of course, later on, everything became more known and it was explained and whatever, but I remember, I got a hold of my kids and my mom and I dragged everybody to the house. And I remember, watching the news and seeing, the Twin Towers. And remember at that point, for anybody that was not a kid, it was like, okay, is more going to come? You know, this happen today? Is there going to be more attacks? You know, it was a very uncertain time. And I want to say that event like changed everything radically. My point being that, um, we have now 20 years later another version of fear porn. Some of it is substantiated, some of it is unsubstantiated, and very little of it will come to pass. But sometimes we need to put that on the back shelf and listen to stories of the supernatural or things like it, or read a magazine like what Shetan Noir produces. Okay, to kind of, I don't want to say distract us, bury your head in the sand is not a good idea either, but it's like, okay, there's other things in life besides this doom and gloom, end of the world, end of everything as we know it. Okay, there is an alternative. There is still things in life that are good. And if, how can I say it? I'm gonna go into metaphysical land. I truly believe that when you get a bunch of humans that start in going into that fear level, you kind of manifest it. You know how they say basically you manifest what you concentrate on, what you fear the most, and there it is. You ask for it, here it is. That sometimes I believe that we do need, whether it's on a personal level or on a collective we level, we need to unfocus from all these worst case scenario outcomes for us, for the country, for the world, humanity, nature. We've got to like step back from this because it's almost going to be like a self-fulfilling prophecy where we're going to produce as a collective this, even it's fear driven, which is the worst, by the way, that all of a sudden we will manifest, we will make it happen because we think about it so much. And I hate to say it, and I know that a lot of, the media out there, sometimes some irresponsible ones, they put stuff out there that, um, and let's face it, that old saying, when newspapers were more, if it bleeds, it leads. That human beings are more attracted by the, how can I say it, the stuff that's violent or stuff like that. We're instantly attracted to it. But in this case, um, I remember I used to know someone. I'm not going to say his name, and he told me, he goes, there was a time when I was a young guy, like he was either a teenager, early 20s, and he told me I started doing this thing where I started ambulance chasing. I would go to all these, every time I would see an ambulance, like a bad accident, I would just go over there and do the, it wasn't just like if I ran, if it was in my, he was basically like, he could have sold personal injury attorney services, but he wasn't. He says, I got hooked on going to all these accident scenes, and even the bad ones were all. And he says, and then all of a sudden, I started wigging out. It started really affecting me. He goes, I don't know at what point I realized that I was being really badly affected by doing this, by seeing this stuff, which by the way, speaks highly of first responders who have to deal with it all the time. And he said he had to step away from it. He had to step away from it because it was like all of a sudden it wasn't like, okay, you went there and you looked at it and then you drove away and then that's the end of that. And maybe he could do that at the beginning. But he said, yeah, no, he says, I ended up going to a few of these accident scenes where there was a fatality. And he goes, and there was one point I realized I got to stop doing this, man. I'm like, it's starting to really badly affect me. My point being that as human beings, we kind of like do that. Sometimes we're very attracted to what seems horrific. You know how they say the automobile scene that you're repelled, but you can't help but look at it. But when we're fed that all the time, all of a sudden it's like, oh, there it is. So getting back to the original point, take time off and spend some time with me. And we'll talk about weird stuff. And I've got a lot of great guests coming on. So don't forget, you can sign up for my Substack newsletter at mppellicer.com. The podcast versions are everywhere. Okay. Whether it's iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, Spotify, you name it, you can find me, whether it's Stories of the Supernatural, Nightshade Diary, Supernatural Storytime, I have Eerie News, or MP Pellicer. Again, guys, you are all wonderful. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. Take care. Until next time.